In today's video, I'm going to show you some quick tips that I use to transform my macro images in Lightroom. So I've picked out some shots from a recent video I did just before Christmas when there was a very deep frost across Edinburgh. So we've got these lovely wintry leaves covered in these lovely ice crystals. We've got this one by itself that I took using off-camera flash. Also took this shot of this ice, this top-down shot, which straight out of camera I think is pretty dull and uninspiring, but hopefully with a little bit of Photoshop work, I actually think I could bring something a little bit better out here. And then finally this shot here, which actually together with this one, I'm going to do just a little bit of focus stacking and then we're going to do some edits. The edits of these should be fairly straightforward, and I will be using the same tools that I use in all of my photography, so hopefully this will be quite useful. I'm going to start off with this because this one doesn't need any additional work. It doesn't need focus stacking. It doesn't need Photoshop. It should just be about the Lightroom edits. Now, straight away, I don't like this as a horizontal photo. I took it in vertical, but I don't think that kind of registered on the camera. So I'm just going to turn it around like this. And straight away, I want to bring up my crop tool. It's quite tall and narrow, and I think that by using a 4x5, 5x7, 4x5 crop, it's just going to bring in the top and bottom a little bit, which in this instance, if we look at the top, we've just got this little bit of orange leaf kind of poking its way into the frame, which doesn't really add anything. So just by bringing in that crop, we're really sort of lessening that leaf. And by bringing in that crop, I already think we've got a slightly stronger image. If anything, I am just going to bring it down a little bit more. Something like this, I think is looking good. It's a little bit dark, so I'm just going to increase our exposure slightly and also drop the shadows. Now, in so doing, if we pay attention to areas like around here, basically sort of the background behind some of these lovely green ivy leaves, by dropping the shadows, we're really kind of darkening that down. And as a result, we're bringing the attention completely to these lovely ice-encrusted ivy leaves and, of course, our lovely big leaf in the middle. I'm not going to touch the white balance because I actually think that as I shot it, it looks pretty much okay. But I am going to go down now to our HSL or hue saturation luminance sliders. This lets you edit your colors individually by changing the hue, changing how powerful they are, and changing the brightness, which is a really, really powerful way of getting a nice look to your images. Now, in this case, I look at the greens first because there's a lot of green around our image, and some of them look a little bit sort of yellowy, so I'm just going to grab that green slider and just move it up in towards the more emeraldy green side. I don't want to go too far. You know what? Actually, as I'm kind of grabbing this green slider, what I thought were more greens, particularly in some of these ivy leaves, I don't think they are really greens at all. And there's a really good way of kind of understanding what colors are where. This little circle here, if you grab this, just click on it the once, and then you bring your cursor over to, let's say, this bit of green, and you can see now next to that cursor, there's like almost an up and down arrow. And if you just look on our colors on the right, you can see that if I move around a little bit, it flicks between aqua and blue. So actually, all of the colors in these leaves are coming from our aqua and blue channels, not from our green. But when this tool is selected, if I just click and hold, and then I can drag up and down, you can see, if you pay attention to the sliders on the right, I'm not moving the sliders, my mouse is still over the image. So it basically allows you to kind of grab that specific color and adjust it as you want. So it's a good way of kind of finding out where those colors really lie. I thought these were going to be greens. They're not greens, these are actually blues. So that's good to know. So I'm actually just going to go back to grabbing the sliders and kind of adjusting these a little bit more manually, because I do want to bring out a bit more of that green. So slightly by dropping those aquas more into the greens rather than in the blues is doing a good job there. Oh, that's the wrong way. And also I'm going to bring those blues down because sort of as we push it the other way, we get a lot of purple, particularly on the middle of the leaf where there are some blues reflecting in the frost. If we go too far, you can see exactly where all that purple is. Very much all in the ice crystals around all these leaves and on the leaf in the middle. So we don't want that. We want it to be a little bit more natural, a bit more in the greens of these ivy leaves. So I think just dropping the aqua and dropping the blue a little bit has already done a really nice thing for this image. And we could do the same with the luminance here, maybe bring down or even boost. Yeah, maybe a boost to those aquas is bringing out some more tones in those leaves. And actually, moving the slider up and down is a really, really good technique to figure out exactly what each slider is going to do to your image. Because of course we know that moving it up is going to lighten the aqua channels, but you don't necessarily know exactly how that's going to look in each image. So I always, when I'm editing, I grab a slider and I just sort of wiggle it around and we have a look at what it does. If I bring this down, it starts to darken those ice crystals, and I don't like that. Instead, we want them to be much more vibrant, much more stand out, to really emphasize all those nice white crystalline bits of ice. So by upping the luminance in the blue channel to +31, I think we've really emphasized that quite a lot. Let's go back to our hues, because I want to play with the yellows and the oranges, which is where this, what the colors of this leaf in the middle. Because it looks nice, but it could stand out a little bit more. So first of all, I'm going to grab this yellow and just start to bring it down into a warmer tone, more towards the oranges. I don't want to go all the way because it does go very sort of red, somewhere around here, -65, so still dropped it quite a lot. And we could maybe do a little bit with the oranges as well. You don't want to go too far, then it starts to go pink. So again, it's about kind of moving the slider all the way, finding the point where you don't like it, and then bringing it back. And then again, with our luminance, I think actually increasing those yellows really helps bring out some of the form of it on this side of the leaf, and do that. And maybe the same with some of the oranges. In fact, actually, no, the oranges I am going to drop because it helps bring a little contrast where the veins of the leaf are that have been iced over. But we could maybe increase the saturation of those yellows and of the oranges as well, just to kind of help those warm colors really pop out against the blues. And if we just turn off this tool and back on, you can see just how much difference it's made. We've made these greens much more vivid emerald green. Before they were a little bit purpley because that's where those blues were hanging out in those leaves. Instead, we've brought them back into a more realistic ivy green color. But then we've contrasted that with a much more vibrant orange on that leaf in the middle, because before, quite sickly yellowy greens here, whereas now we've got lovely vibrant orange tones that contrast beautifully with those greens. So there's very little more that I'm going to want to do to this shot, but there are a couple of things. First of all, I want to do a little bit of color grading because it works so well, particularly with some of these winter images. I want to cool down the shadows just a bit, bringing in that cool slider, and I'm just going to play with putting a little bit of warmth in the highlights as well, something like this. If we turn that off and on, I think that's quite a subtle shift, but I do think it makes a difference. There is a little bit of the coolness back in the shadows, which I do really like. But I'm also going to go to the tone curve. I'm just going to put some points in here and here, and then I'm going to drag this bottom point up just to give it a bit of a filmic fade. If we go too far, then it gets very, very filmic fade, like you've applied some preset, filmic preset. And I don't want to go that far. I just want it to be a little bit, because our black points drop to a deep black before, and I don't really want that. I want it to have a little bit of that slightly ethereal fade to it, which I do enjoy. If we just turn that off and on, you can see how much it's kind of lowered that contrast. But in so doing, I think we've lost a little bit of the punch on the leaf in the middle. So I'm going to bring in a selective mask, and it's going to be a radial gradient. And I'm just going to drag this in, basically over the leaf here. Right now you can see that we've got this very hard edge between the red where the filter is being applied and where it isn't. So we're going to grab our feather and move that all the way to 100, and as we do, look how much that red circle blurs out. Therefore, whatever we apply is going to much more naturally blend in with the rest of the image. What I'm going to do here is slightly increase those whites, maybe highlight boost a little bit, but crucially, we're going to add a little bit of clarity and a little bit of texture, because both those things are really going to help all of that crispy white iciness really stand out on the leaf. And just doing those couple of things, I think we've got, if we just have a look at that mask off and on, it's very much centered on this part of the leaf, but as a result, I really like how much it looks even icier than it did, because we've brought back some of that nice contrast. So I think that's everything that I want to do here. Let's just have a look at our before. Straight out of camera, it's a nice enough snap, but the colors don't look that great, and it is a little bit drab. And in just using a few Lightroom tools, I think we've brought out something that looks a lot nicer. But I'm going to move on to this shot next, because it's very similar. It's another icy leaf on the ground. And I just love that, because it's packed with texture from all of these ice crystals. But this shot I actually did is just a 2-image focus stack, because if we look here, we can see that we've got a nice sharp focus on this part of the leaf here, but it does sort of tail off to being out of focus down here. Whereas the other shot focused on this part of the leaf, but it does mean that our middle is now out of focus. So that should be very easily done by just selecting both images, right-clicking, and go Edit in, and then Open as Layers in Photoshop. So here they are, and you can see they are stacked on top of each other as layers in this one Photoshop document. So I'm going to select them both like this and go to Edit and Auto Align Layers. Now this is just to kind of nudge everything in line, just in case there was any movement in the camera. It doesn't look like there really was any, but that's fine. And then we go back into Edit and we go Auto Blend Layers. Make sure that Stack Images is checked and press OK. And that has created this merged image on top. And as we can see, we've got sharp image up here where all these ice crystals are, and sharp down here at the end of the leaf. So it has done a really nice blend of those two shots. I didn't want to do a full focus stack of absolutely everything in the image. It was really just about this leaf. I wanted to make sure that it was nice and in focus. Now it is. I'm just going to press Control and S or Command S to save it and take it back over into Lightroom. So what I'm going to do here is actually just copy the settings from this one, because it's basically a similar image in the series. It's taken at the same time in the same conditions. So I'd like to make sure that I'm keeping a fairly uniform approach to to colors and to exposure, so that it actually kind of looks like it's the same series of photos. So I'm just going to do Control Copy. That's going to bring up my copy settings. I don't want the crop copied, and I also don't want any of my masks copied, because those will only be specific to this image. Press copy and then go back over into our stacked image, which is not this one, it is this one here. Edit.tiff is the one, and Control V to paste those settings. And straight away that does look pretty good. If we look at our before and our after, we can see how much more vibrant that orange is. We've got some lovely details going on here, but I actually think that orange is a little bit too much. So I'm going to go and just adjust this, which you can do once you've pasted those settings. You can then go back in using this as a starting point and just adjust it to make sure that it looks exactly as you want it to. I'm going to slightly bring those yellows back up and also those oranges, so that we do still have some additional warmth to this leaf, but it's not quite as overpoweringly orange as it was. And actually, by brightening up the orange channel rather than darkening it, I think that looks nice. And I'm going to apply another mask, but this time I'm going to use the brush tool. I'm going to use my mouse wheel to make it a little bit smaller. And here I'm going to increase the highlights. And again, we want to add a little bit of pop of clarity and a little bit of extra texture to bring out the lovely crisp textures of all those ice crystals. But this time I'm actually just going to brush it in around the leaf. It's probably not going to look that obvious. In fact, it's barely doing anything at all. I'm also going to increase the whites so you can see what this is doing. I've got my brush at quite a low flow at 23, so that means that it's essentially that is 23% of the effect. So I can build up stroke by stroke rather than just applying the maximum amount each time. So that's why I'm kind of making these sort of painterly motions, because I am literally painting these effects in on top of our image. And it's not doing a lot. It looks quite subtle even to me on this monitor. It probably looks even more subtle on YouTube after the compression. But it is making enough of a difference just to kind of help everything stand out. Certainly those highlights have really helped make things pop. And if we just turn that off and on, you can see, hopefully you can see, the difference it's making on the leaf and on the edges around here. Again, it's not about transforming the image, just helping some of those elements stand out a little bit more. Bring out my crop tool, and I'm just going to bring it in slightly, just getting rid of this little bit of leaf. But I think that's all I want to do with the crop. And to be honest, for this shot, I think that is everything that I would do to this. Not because it is so wonderful I can't do any more, but frankly because this is just a bit of a snap of a leaf on the ground. There's only so much time I really want to spend on this kind of image. So that's why copying my settings from another image and pasting them here has made loads of sense. This isn't such a great image that I want to sit and spend an hour crafting every single slider that I can. This is just about making sure that it looks good enough and that I'm happy with it. So let's move on then to this one, because this actually was one of my favorite images from my video. I used my flash off camera to take this image. I used my settings at f9 and 250th of a second to make sure that all of my ambient light was completely black, so that when I used my flash to light up this leaf, it was only my flash that the camera was capturing. And here, by holding my flash behind the leaf, shooting through it, it's really lit that leaf up beautifully. And I love how it stands out so brightly against that completely black background. But again, there's plenty we can do to transform this image into something even more special. I will slightly adjust the exposure here because there is some stuff we can do, but it's a very delicate balance because all of the information basically is held in the highlights. So as soon as I start to tone that down just a bit, you can see how sort of weird and grey this leaf starts to go, and then eventually it just falls to nothing. So I'm going to leave those highlights where they are, right in the middle, because it doesn't look good adjusting those. But I am going to grab my shadows, drop those down, and that's helping just hide some more of this background. If I bring it right up, you can see that there is information in those shadows in the background. And I actually don't want that. I want this to fall to black, and I can do that very naturally just by grabbing it and dragging it down. I don't want to do the same with the black channel, because if I do, it goes very weird and punchy and contrasty. So I'm going to leave that right there in the middle. And then we're going to go back to our HSL tab. And straight away, I want to do similar to what I did before with the yellows, bringing it down and just helping warm this leaf up, making it much more of a rich orangey tone. And I want to do a touch of that with the orange channel too, but not too much, because again, it will go very quickly pink and weird. And I do not want a weird pink leaf. So I think something like this, again, it's about subtlety, because going too far, then it's not the real leaf, it's not the real color, but nor was it a sort of a sickly yellowy leaf. So I'm quite happy with a compromise around here. You could maybe play with that luminance up or down. In fact, up I think works quite nicely with the oranges, with the yellows rather. It is fine tuning, and I often, when I'm editing these shots, will go back to different tools again and again, and I'll change one and then change another, and then go back to the first one and think, oh, okay, well now I can do a little bit more of this. There's no one right or wrong way to do your edits, so it really is just about kind of playing around and seeing what you think looks best. It may be that down here I go to the camera calibration section, because you can do a lot of color work in here, but sometimes I do prefer just to do it in the HSL tab. For example, grabbing the blue primary hue, dragging it to the left a little bit, basically does what we were doing before in kind of changing some of those yellows and making them a little bit more golden. So I could drop that to -11, and what happens if I increase the saturation or decrease it? Let's increase. I think that looks quite nice. These greens, yeah, we don't want it to go greeny yellow, but nor do I want it to go whatever that is. So let's leave it in the middle, and I might just slightly drop that saturation. If we just turn off that tool, yeah, it's a small shift, but it's, I like it. I think it looks nice enough. I might even go back to our main exposure tab and just slightly increase that saturation, give it a little bit more warmth. Before and after. Before, very sort of sickly green. Now, lovely sort of warm orange tones that really jump off the screen. What about adding in then a little bit of that same sort of filmic fade we did before? Oh, I think that looks nice because it again just stops this black background from dropping into absolute black, which doesn't always look good. So I think just somewhere around here, I don't want to go too far because it just becomes grey very quickly, but maybe around here, just I like it's a nice balance. It's a nice balance. I think that's quite nice. But before and after, I'm really happy with how this looks. And to be honest, I don't think there's anything more I want to do with this. I don't want to play with clarity or texture. I don't think it needs it. We've got nice contrast. We've brought out some more of those warm colors. And because we captured so much of the detail in like the veins on the leaf in camera when we took the photo, I just don't think it needs anything adding to it in Lightroom. So I'm going to move on to the last image. And that is this one of an icebound puddle. Now, to be honest, this is a shot that when I found this big frozen puddle with all these things going through it, I spent a little bit of time kind of moving the camera around, trying to find what I thought might be an interesting composition. And I took a variety of photos. None of them I particularly liked. This was the best of a bad bunch. It's not a great shot, but I thought it might be useful for me to show how I might go about trying to get something out of this image. And actually, a lot of the work is going to be done in Photoshop, which I will come to, but we'll start off at least in Lightroom by boosting that exposure quite a bit because it is quite dark, balancing it out by bringing down some of those highlights, maybe dropping the shadows a little bit to bring back some of that contrast, and just upping the whites to, again, just give it a little bit more of a kick. So before and after, already it's looking like a better image. I'm going to add a little bit of clarity because it's an icy shot full of tiny little air bubbles and things. So a bit of clarity here is going to help give that a boost. If we go too far, let's drag it all the way, suddenly becomes super crunchy, super weird, don't like it. So again, a subtle touch here is enough. Let's look at our hues because again, we've got some touches of sort of sickly yellow, so we can warm those up a little bit. Maybe up the luminance, and let's up the saturation so that they really stand out amongst the ice. But I don't think there's really any other color. There's a bit of blue, but to be honest, I think what I'm going to do here is grab that saturation and actually remove a lot of that blue because it isn't really adding anything. The ice would be clear, so I think the blue is coming in there from my white balance. And by removing it, it's kind of readjusting those colors in the scene, and it allows this bit of yellow, this trapped bit of leaf, to really stand out. That's all I'm going to do in Lightroom. So I'm going to go right click, edit in, Photoshop. And straight away, I'm going to just duplicate that layer. And most of what I'm going to do now is actually object removal within the image. I want to clean it up. I want to clean up some of this ice. We've got a lot of dirt and bits of debris and bits of things that have fallen on it, all of which makes it quite a chaotic image. Whereas actually, for me, what this image was about were these lovely lines of the ice just swooping their way around. That goes around here, it curls around here. Even this bit of stick I'm going to try and get rid of and really just try and focus on the lines in the ice. And I am including this crack in those lines because I really like that and what that kind of adds to this scene as well. So I'm probably going to skip ahead for a lot of this, but most of my cleanup work is going to be very, very simple, just using the spot healing brush. If I zoom in and bring up that brush and then right click, we can increase the brush size fairly big, so I can go in and then just click on each little bit of imperfection in the ice, and Photoshop works its magic and gets rid of it. Even bits like this, we can just do that. Some bits I might also use the clone stamp tool, so I might take a reading from over here and then paint that in over here. So those are the tools I'm going to be using here just to go through and clean up this image. So I'm going to speed through that and then we'll take another look. So I've done a lot of cleanup here, as you can see. If we just turn this off and back on, you can see just how much difference that has made. Now, It's up to you whether you would consider doing this kind of cleanup a fake image or cheating or something. But from my perspective, I haven't changed the actual image itself. The ice is still the same. Those forms are still there. The lighting, the colors are all exactly the same. I've just taken away some bits of debris that had fallen on and just some other imperfections that aren't necessarily, they don't really add anything to the scene, but by taking it away, we've reduced a lot of that kind of chaos that was there. And instead, it allows the eye to really focus on the form in the ice, these lovely swirling patterns, and this nice sharp crack line going down the right-hand side. So I'm going to open up now the Camera Raw Filter tool. Now this is going to bring up the exact same set of tools that we've just been working with in Lightroom, except it's now in Photoshop. And because we've done some of the work already in Lightroom, I'm going to go straight to our masking tools, bring up another brush like we did before. And here I'm just going to go down to our whites, boost those quite a bit, and down to our clarity, and give that another good boost. Because what I want to do is paint that over. In fact, you know what? Let's boost that even more. I want to really emphasize these lines. So I'm sort of roughly painting in that light over the top of this ice, really helping brighten some parts of it up. And I'm going to do similar by darkening some other bits down. Let's have a look at that clarity. If I just do that up and down, you can see sort of what it does to the image. And it's not, again, too far. Because we've brushed it in selectively, it doesn't look as bad, but it still doesn't look good. So still, plus 15 is as far as I want to go with it. And if I just turn that off and on, you can see the difference that has made. It's really brought out these forms, and I really, really like that. But I'm going to create another one. This one is going to be bringing down the shadows, and I'm going to paint that in just around some of these parts here. Almost at random, but basically wherever it's already dark, I'm trying to sort of emphasize that just a little bit. If we turn that one off and on, you can see the difference. Maybe you can see the difference that is making. Let's go back to our edit tab. And again, I want to bring up the luminance of our oranges and yellows and the saturation. Because we've only got this one little splash of color, just this hint of this leaf coming through the ice. So I really want that to be a bold color because it's the only color in the scene. There's nothing else going on. It's just about that little pop of golden leaf just poking its way through that bit of the ice. So if I press save, that should then take our image straight back into Lightroom. Here is our original straight out of camera file. It's dark, the colors are very drab, and we've got all of this dirt and debris and detritus scattered all over it. Now, I do not think that this is the world's best photo. Not even close. But I do quite like it. I think there is something there. I love these sort of abstract swirling patterns. And I do think that I've only got there by putting in that work in Photoshop. Out of camera like it was with this, I don't think this is a very compelling image. So we've reduced all of that clutter, all of that chaos, and really brought the image back to what's important, which is those forms. And I do think that there's something about this shot that I like. However, just want to bring in the crop a little bit here. Maybe pull it down this side too, just a touch. Just basically I'm making this curve reach slightly further up the frame because there's less going on in that top little bit. So I've just tightened it up. And yeah, I like it. But I think that does bring me to an end of today's video. I've really enjoyed editing these photos because I really like taking them, and I think that these are shots that they had a lot of promise straight out of camera. I really liked them when I saw the scenes when I was out and about, and I like the raw files as they were, but I think that they definitely lended themselves well to a relatively subtle touch. in the post-production. I would really be interested in what you think of what I've done to these shots, whether you think I've made the right choices, maybe I've gone too far in some of my edits, and maybe you would do things differently. And certainly, of course, if you have found this video helpful, if you've actually kind of learned some tools, learned some techniques, I really hope that is the case, and you can let me know in the comments below. And of course, make sure to hit that like button if you have enjoyed the video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you're not a subscriber to my channel already, then please do consider hitting the subscribe button, because there's plenty more videos on here that I think you would enjoy. But that's it for me. I'll see you next time.